On Azerbaijan's eastern coast, the city of Baku is hosting the COP29, which commenced today amid mounting environmental and economic challenges. This year's summit presents a crucial opportunity to address the ongoing challenges of climate financing, adaptation, and the equitable distribution of resources. Critical questions loom large. Will the long-promised loss and damage fund finally take shape? And can global leaders transform words into actions? All of this and more we'll be discussing in Think Tank. Stay tuned.
Our world is becoming unhinged.
According to The Independent, the COP29 marks a critical moment for global climate action with a heavy focus on climate finance. COP29 President Mukhtar Babayev described the talks as a moment of truth for the Paris Agreement, stressing that the bold financial commitments are essential to avoiding catastrophic warming beyond 1.5 degrees Celsius. Key issues on the agenda including finalizing the Loss and Damage Fund and setting more ambitious targets for cutting carbon emissions. UN Climate Secretary Simone Steele highlighted the urgent need for global cooperation, warning that failure to act could lead to unprecedented climate crises.
As the United Nations Climate Change Conference COP29 kicks off in Baku, Azerbaijan, the future of global climate action hangs in the balance. This year's summit comes as Earth is on track to endure its hottest year on record for the second consecutive year. At the summit, negotiations will focus on bolstering financial support for developing nations struggling to combat climate change. However, recent political shifts cast uncertainty on these efforts. The election of Donald Trump has raised doubts about the United States' commitment to global climate agreements, particularly as the country ramps up oil production. Several key leaders will not attend this year's summit, including Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, who cancelled due to health issues, and German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, whose domestic political turmoil has prevented his attendance. Additionally, the absence of major figures like Chinese President Xi Jinping and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi further complicates the summit's effectiveness. With over 100 heads of state expected, COP29 has been dubbed the Finance COP, as nations aim to establish a new climate finance goal to assist vulnerable countries. Yet tensions are expected, given wealthy nations' historical resistance to providing the necessary funds to support emissions reductions and resilience efforts. As delegates convene, the question remains, can COP29 rise to the challenge and forge a path toward meaningful climate action? Or will it fall victim to political distractions and unmet promises?
Delving more into this, joining us from Cairo is Dr. Alaa Serhan, a professor of environmental economics, and from Paris, Dr. Haider Salmi, a senior researcher at France's National Research Institute for Agriculture, Food and Environment. Welcome, sir, and it's a pleasure to have you both on the show. Dr. Serhan, with this year's summit dubbed as the Finance COP, how can the Baku summit ensure climate finance reaches the countries most affected by climate change, of course, sir?
Okay, first of all, this, as you rightly said, COP29 is dubbed as the the climate finance COP. So it's essentially it's been a journey that is the debate between developed and developing countries over the responsibility, the financial responsibility of the impacts of climate change has been going on for a number of decades right now. But I think we are reaching a point whereby all the pledges from the developed countries towards the developing countries and in terms of their needs, I think COP29 will need to show some sort of a strong, I wouldn't say commitment, I would say more than commitment. I think we would need to have some solid, actionable points on the ground from the developed countries and to reach a new climate deal, which involves finance and which takes into consideration one of the important principles that needs to be upheld, which is the common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities. So this is very important because we have been pointing fingers at each other about the historical responsibility of climate change. I think we need to stop. I think this needs to stop. I think what we need to do right now is to ask everybody to come together and the developed and the developing countries, and we need to talk. We have a very serious discussion because I think we're running out of time. This planet, this is an existential threat to the planet, and I think without having climate finance, without having the financial resources.
Sir, in light of the COP29 that's taking place now as we talk, isn't the developing and the developed countries already in discussions how to solve this issue?
I think the idea is political will. I think the whole idea is countries will have to weigh in their own national interests over the global interest, the planetary interest. They have to look at investments for the future of this planet. So I think it's more about national agenda versus global agenda. It's more about how we at the national level are able to put in some priorities for the existence.
Dr. Salami, has the world made tangible progress in implementing the Loss and Damage Fund pledges approved at the COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh that took place here in Egypt?
This summit, firstly, the COP in 27 in Sharm el-Sheikh, it can a very important event because they signed about this the event and financing the fund, as well as the COP held in UAE, to gather all relevant bodies, whether they are the defendant on protecting the environment and the climate, and from the other hand, the producers and the manufacturers of the fossil industries, and they made a progress in the form of the fund. Now in Baku summit, the summit will be a technical one and a summit for the 100 billion US dollar fund. There's no progress about it. Therefore, there should be a review for this this goal from the sides of financing and the commitment from one hand, and from the other hand, the idea of the exchange of carbon for the polluted country and the non-polluted country that were out of the framework. Therefore, it is proposed upon the agenda of the dialogue. Thirdly, this summit, as we noticed, it will be a technical one, and we shouldn't expect a big result. But I think...
Sir, I'll be back to you again to discuss the technical issue and why it's a technical summit. But Dr. Sarhan, great progress was made in the COP27 and COP28. But how does the COP29 aim to build on these outcomes, sir?
Right. So COP27, which was held in Sharm el-Sheikh, we have witnessed a milestone for any climate summits. The birth, I would say, the very difficult labor that we had for the birth of the Loss and Damage Fund was actually done in Sharm el-Sheikh.
Okay, sir, could you tell us more about the Loss and Damage Fund for our viewers to know more?
Okay, so the Loss and Damage Fund basically is the idea is trying to bring the concept of climate justice into context and into the right perspective. Whereby,
perfect, sir. Continue your answer, please.
I'm sorry, can you come again? Sorry.
Go on with your answer.
Sure. Okay. So essentially, the climate, the Loss and Damage Fund we were trying to put in a very important principle, which is countries that have no historical responsibility for climate change since the Industrial Revolution, not then and not now, no current responsibility, and they're the most vulnerable. They are being devastated by extreme weather events, by flooding, by lots of very short-term onslaught effects of climate change. They are being devastated. They don't have the financial infrastructure. They don't have the ability. They don't have the physical infrastructure to be able to withhold or withstand all the dire impacts of climate change. So rather than expecting some form of humanitarian assistance or humanitarian aid from the developed countries, we would rather have this formalized into some sort of a compensation fund, if you will, some sort of an insurance policy that countries would subscribe to, so that if any of these devastating effects happen, then we would have the mechanism to be able to compensate those countries, especially the most vulnerable developing countries.
Perfect, sir. I'll leave it here and I'll be back again to continue the question with you, the answer, sir. Dr. Salami, how can this year's summit enhance the credibility and effectiveness of the Loss and Damage Fund as it approaches activation in 2025, sir?
Firstly, there are main disagreements about this fund, the size of its financing, and therefore the summit should booster or trying to booster the size of commitment. To participate in this summit is weak. And the second point proposed before this fund or upon this fund, who's going to operate the fund? Either the United Nations and the COP Secretary isn't able to do it, either to the International Bank or to establish a new fund. This is a main point. And the third point, the financing given by the fund, are they in the framework of supporting development or just for financing, or rather for compensation? And this, in my case, it is for compensation. They are.
Okay, before we continue, let's take a look at the main priorities in COP29's agenda. Stay tuned and we'll be back again to continue our discussions. We're still joined by our dear guest today discussing this year's climate summit taking place in Baku. Dr. Salami, how can the COP29 bridge the divide between developed and developing nations on climate actions and a financer?
The issue basically of the upcoming summit is a technical dedicated for the issue of financing. In my estimation, there will be a big progress. There's going to prepare the files, monitor this agreement, to be prepared for the COP30 estimated to be held in Brazil. And we are betting it to be a decisive COP, and particularly for the symbol of Brazil, where the agreement of diversity, genetic and environment diversity, to be focused basically on the carbon market, the issue financing, and the how to manage who's to contribute, and their description. Then we shouldn't expect results, but I wish to highlight the positivity of each country to host the COP would contribute in developing and improve the awareness of such issues, as these COPs are piled up types, as we are reaching into COP29, that they are moving slowly, and they are some would be a launch of some resolution, but other substances to be prepared for the following ones. And from the other hand, this summit, the US elections is on top of the agenda, because they are free of the withdrawal of the Paris Agreement and maybe from the COP at all, and also should be hosted in a different atmosphere in the Middle East, in Ukraine, civil wars, and the United Nations should impose its ability to settlement of conflict. And
Mr. Salmi, I'll be back again. I'll go to Dr. Serhan. Sir, many world leaders have chosen to send delegates instead of attending in person. How could this impact the conference's ability to deliver binding recommendations and decisions for global climate action?
Well, first of all, climate change is all about international consensus among all countries. It's all countries need to come together. This is the whole rationale of having the COP, which is the Conference of Parties, every year is kind of a summit. It's an Earth summit, if you will. So the idea is we need climate change. The impacts of climate change do not stop in any one country. They are cross borders. They cross water bodies, lakes, oceans, and so on and so forth. So they're not localized to one area. So the idea is we need the international community, the 198 countries who have subscribed to the UNFCCC, to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, and to the Paris Agreement. They need to come together, because all countries will need to work together, the rich and the poor, the developed and the developing countries. They need to come together, and they need to agree on a way forward, with each and every country with its own capacities and with its own differentiated responsibility. We need to differentiate the responsibilities between the rich and the poor, and we need to look at respective capabilities of the countries. So that's why we are having this COP every year, as we take stock of where we are. We look at the science. We look at the
Do you read any progression, sir, in this convention taking place every year? Do you see improvement? Do you see anything that's changing in the climate exchange and or the climate change in general?
Yes, absolutely. This is a very good question because,
thank you, sir.
Honestly, with 2023 being the hottest, the recorded
the year 2023, you mean, sir?
Yes. So what happens is that this is putting us like this is giving us like an incentive to do something now. So the idea is meeting every year, and with all this happening, with all the forest fires, with all the droughts, with all the flooding and everything, this is just an audition, if you will. This is an audition to what is going to happen if we don't come together as an international community and we
okay,
work
sir,
together.
I'll go ask Dr. Salmi. Our last question here is, Donald Trump previously withdrew the United States from the Paris Agreement and has expressed intent to roll back environmental regulations. How could his presidency impact the COP29 and the global fight against climate change, sir?
This has a psychological impact and political and legal impact, as Donald Trump in his first presidency term withdrew from Paris Agreement and returned symbolically to such agreement, but now there is a threat to exit of such an agreement, and as it is known, Trump's opinions of the issues of the climate change and this big country that lead the whole world psychologically and from the financing perspective will be impacted. From the other hand, that will give a chance and opportunity for the hesitated countries to withdraw their commitment in financing the fund. We hope that the different resolution to have a positive position as what has been recorded during the past 4 to 5 years. The size of the climate disasters.
Sir, I ran out of time. I'm very sorry. Of course, this convention needs episodes and episodes to discuss, and we'll be discussing and we'll be making minute-by-minute coverage on this very contentious, important issue. That was from Cairo, Dr. Ali Sarhan, a professor of environmental economics, and from Paris, Dr. Ali Salemi, a senior researcher at the France's National Research Institute for Agriculture, Food and Environment. Thank you very much both for your insights today. The outcome of the COP29 will be more than numbers or commitments on paper. They will shape our collective future. The decisions made in the Baku will shape the future of global climate policy and determine whether vulnerable nations receive the support they need to survive and adapt. Will the summit mark a turning point, or will the path to climate resilience remain fraught with obstacles? Time will tell, but the stakes have never been higher. That brings us to the end of our episode today. Thank you very much for watching, and stay tuned for more here on Qnews.